There is something that happens to you in relationships that almost nobody outside of them ever sees. On the surface, you look fine. You function. You show up. You are, by most measures, someone who loves well, deeply, attentively, with a level of care that most people would be grateful to receive, but underneath that, something else is running, a constant low-level monitoring. A scan you can't turn off. You noticed the 2-minute delay before they replied. You felt the shift in their tone before they said a word. You replayed the last conversation 3 times and found something in it. A pause, a word choice. A moment where something felt slightly off, and your nervous system filed it away as evidence, not because you're paranoid, not because you don't trust them, not because you're insecure in the way people mean when they use that word dismissively, but because somewhere in your history, the people you loved most were not consistently there. And your nervous system learned early, quietly, and very thoroughly that love is not something you can simply have. It's something you have to watch, something you have to maintain, something that requires your constant attention. Or it might disappear without warning. Psychology tells a completely different story about this. Anxious attachment is rarely just a personality trait. It is a set of specific psychological adaptations, ways of loving, monitoring, and relating, that form in people who learned early that connection was uncertain. There are 5 rare psychological traits found in people with anxious attachment, and once you understand them, you will finally stop calling yourself too much. The first trait is the one that started everything. Trait 1. Your nervous system learned to treat emotional distance as a threat. Here's what nobody tells you about this. It's a Tuesday evening. They haven't texted back in 3 hours. This isn't unusual. You know they're busy. You know there's a reasonable explanation. You know that logically, everything is fine, but your body doesn't know that. Your chest tightens, your attention narrows. You put your phone down and pick it up again 40 seconds later. You draft a message, delete it, draft another one. You're not choosing to feel this way. Your nervous system made the decision before your conscious mind had a chance to weigh in. Psychology calls this hypervigilance in attachment, a state where the nervous system has been trained to treat signs of emotional distance the same way it treats physical danger. In practice, it means your threat detection system and your attachment system have become linked. When someone you love feels far away, your body responds as though something is genuinely wrong, not because you're dramatic, because that's what your nervous system learned to do when closeness felt uncertain. This is not weakness, this is a finely calibrated survival response. The cost is that it exhausts you, but the origin is not instability, it's love, trying to protect itself. But there's a trait beneath this one that explains why certain people feel magnetic to you in a way that others don't. And once you see it, everything clicks. Trait 2, you are drawn to people who give love inconsistently, and that inconsistency feels like intensity. This is the one most people never connect to anxious attachment. Think about the relationships that have felt most alive to you, the ones that kept you up at night, not with dread exactly, but with something that felt adjacent to it. The people who were warm and then cool, present and then gone, who made you feel seen one day and invisible the next. Something in you mistook that pattern for passion. The uncertainty felt like depth, the distance felt like mystery, the moments of closeness, when they finally came, felt more real than anything steady ever had. Psychology links this to intermittent reinforcement, the same principle that makes gambling addictive. When love arrives unpredictably, it activates the brain's reward system more powerfully than love that arrives reliably. In simple terms, your nervous system learned to associate uncertainty with intensity. Consistent love, by contrast, can feel flat, safe but somehow unreal, not because you don't want it, but because your brain never learned to recognize it as the thing you were looking for. That's not a flaw in your character. That's a pattern in your nervous system, one that formed before you had any choice in the matter. If this already feels uncomfortably accurate, if you've spent years wondering why the wrong relationships felt so right, this channel exists for exactly that. You're welcome to subscribe. Psychology that explains your mind, not one that tells you to fix it. Trait 3, you process the emotional state of the people you love as if it were your own. And this one runs deeper than it looks. You walk into a room where someone you love is quietly upset about something they haven't mentioned, something they might not even be fully aware of themselves, and you feel it, not metaphorically, physically, a tightening somewhere, a shift in your own mood that arrived before any information did. You spend the rest of the evening trying to fix something that was never named, trying to restore something that no one else noticed was missing, trying to make someone feel better who didn't ask you to. Psychology calls this somatic empathy. the experience of feeling another person's emotional state in your own body via the nervous system's mirror response. In practice, it means your body has become a tuning fork for the emotional frequency of the people close to you. You don't just notice how they feel, you absorb it. The strength here is extraordinary. You are the person in any room who knows what's actually happening beneath the surface. You can offer care before it's asked for. You can hold space for complexity that most people can't even perceive. The cost is that you often cannot tell the difference between your feelings and theirs, and you exhaust yourself caring for emotional states that were never yours to carry. It's late. They said something earlier today, something small, something that probably meant nothing. A one-word reply when you expected more. A fine that landed differently than usual. And now it's midnight and you're still there with it, turning it over, checking it for meaning, asking yourself if you imagined it, asking yourself what you did, asking yourself if this is the beginning of something you've been afraid of for a long time. You know this feeling. You've been here before. And part of you, the part that's been trying to get quieter, knows that this is not really about the one-word reply. It's about every time someone you loved went quiet and didn't come back the same way. That's not anxiety, that's memory. And memory is not the same as the present moment, even when it feels indistinguishable from it. Trait 4, you love through anticipation. You try to meet needs before they become reasons to leave. Here's what this looks like from the inside. You track what the people you love need. Not consciously, not as a strategy, it just happens. You remember what they said they were worried about last week? You notice when they seem tired before they say it? You adjust your own behavior preemptively, pulling back when they seem to need space, reaching forward when they seem to need connection, all without being asked, all without anyone knowing you're doing it. Psychology links this to anxious attachment's core adaptive strategy, what researchers call hyperactivating behaviors, combined with threat anticipation. In simple terms, you learned early that if you could predict what someone needed and provide it before they had to ask, you reduced the chance of losing them. Love became something you performed as much as something you felt. The shadow side is real. You can become so focused on tracking what others need that you lose touch with what you need. You give so much preemptively that there's sometimes nothing left to give when you actually need to. But here's what that trait also is. It is one of the most sophisticated forms of emotional intelligence that exists. You see people clearly. You respond to what's actually happening rather than what's being said. That is rare. That is a gift, even if no one ever named it that. The next trait is the one that most people with anxious attachment carry in silence. And it may be the most important one. Trait 5. You believe that if you love someone well enough, you can make the relationship feel safe. This is the trait that almost nobody names. You have poured yourself into relationships. You have been patient when patience was hard. You have communicated clearly, apologized quickly, stayed when leaving would have been easier. You have tried to be the kind of partner, the kind of friend, the kind of person whose love was so steady and so clear that the other person would finally feel safe enough to stay. And when it still didn't feel secure, you didn't conclude that the relationship wasn't secure. You concluded that you hadn't tried hard enough yet. Psychology calls this the internal working model of anxious attachment, a deeply held belief, formed in childhood, that love is conditionally available and that the right behavior can unlock it. In simple terms, you learned that connection is something you earn through effort, not something you simply have. So when a relationship feels uncertain, your first instinct is to try harder rather than to ask whether the relationship itself is the problem. This is not naivety, this is loyalty. This is a person who believes in the people they love even when the evidence is complicated. That belief has cost you, but it also says something true about who you are. Someone who does not give up easily on the people who matter to them. You were never too much. You were someone whose nervous system learned, in conditions that were not your fault, that love required vigilance, that connection required maintenance, that closeness had to be earned and re-earned and earned again, because once or more than once, it disappeared when you weren't watching carefully enough. That learning made you who you are, attentive, deeply feeling, capable of a quality of love that most people never develop because they were never required to work that hard for it. The goal is not to love less. The goal is not to need less. The goal is to find the relationships, and eventually the relationship with yourself, where your love is met with the consistency your nervous system has been waiting for your whole life. You were never broken. You were built to love in conditions that made love feel like something you had to fight for. And you are allowed now to rest. Which trait hit closest to home? Drop a number in the comments, subscribe. You're in the right place.